Well, the fire you've just been watching is in some ways a metaphor, maybe, for the broader decline of Christianity in Europe. That decline has been swift and full of unintended consequences. Mark Steyn has been studying this question for more than 30 years, and we're glad to have him with us tonight. Mark, thanks a lot for coming on. There's so many things to say about this, but the one I can't get out of my mind is we haven't built anything like Notre Dame Cathedral in the West in so long. We don't build things that are beautiful anymore, maybe almost by design. No. Will there ever be anything built like that ever again?
I think we've lost the knack. Notre Dame is about a 10-minute walk from the Pompidou Center, named for the late President Pompidou, and that is one of the ugly, like almost every modern building in Paris, that is one of the ugliest things you've ever seen. And when you go back 8.5 centuries to the time when this building began construction, it took a century for the first part of it to be completed. The men who set to work on this knew that they would not see it finished in their lifetime, but their sense of a transcendent meaning to life was so strong that the idea of building the most beautiful buildings to the glory of God, they took naturally in a way that we don't anymore.
Well, and that, of course, I think is the reason that they built buildings like Notre Dame in the first place, because they were building it not just for their own amusement, but to glorify God. So this is not, and we're not, want to be clear, speculating about the cause of this fire, though, you know, it happened, as Trace Gallagher just noted, at beginning of Holy Week, and it is not the only church that has caught fire in France in the last year, or you've seen quite a few desecrations of churches. Again, not saying this is one of them, but give us a sense of the scale of what's been happening.
Well, Christendom is in retreat in Europe, and in France particularly. France has actually quite an aggressive belief in secularism, and according to some polls, the French are, even by the standards of the modern Western world, among the most godless people in that sense. 3 years ago, in that terrible summer that began with the Nice truck killings, and when it seemed as if the entire French state was unraveling, I went to Rouen Cathedral for the funeral of Ramel, the French priest who had his throat cut at Mass. And I then went to the Basilica of Saint-Denis, which is in the north of Paris, where the French kings are buried, and basically is a Christian museum in the heart of what is now a Muslim suburb, in effect. There's no sense of Christianity outside the walls of that cathedral. And it was after that that I went to then Notre Dame, because you do have the sense that a living, breathing faith is just becoming actually a museum, an art gallery, a storage facility. And the French who were on the streets in tears this evening, on the streets of Paris, they're not mourning, I don't think they're mourning just history or architecture or art or culture. They're mourning something else. But what that something else, post-Christian France can't quite identify it. And that's really the conundrum. When Monsieur Macron says, oh, we're going to rebuild it for what? When people talk about, the heart of France has died, what is in the soul of France? What is this? Is it just a building, or is it something more?
What's so interesting about Notre Dame specifically, as you well know, is that it was desanctified, de-Christianized during the French Revolution for a time, and was made a secular temple, but then it immediately reverted to what it always was, which was a Christian holy place. Do you think there's any hope that something like that will happen again in France?
Well, you never know how these things will go. I mean, everyone knows The Hunchback of Notre Dame, the Victor Hugo novel, which actually did quite a lot to restore the importance of Notre Dame in the minds of the French people. But Michel Houellebecq, a controversial novelist, he wrote a novel called Submission, which posits that France elects a Muslim president. And he knows the central character knows this is going to mean something, and he actually makes a conscious effort to try and recover his lost Catholic faith. And that character goes on a kind of pilgrimage, and he's moved by it as music, and he's moved by it as ritual, but he can't quite make the final step and reconnect with God and the Catholic faith. And that scene in that book is in a certain sense the question raised by this fire tonight. Is it a hole in the soul, or is it just a missing building burned to the ground?
Hasn't made it a better society, the death of Christianity, I will say. I
No,
don't think
it
anyone
has
could argue
not.
that.
No,
it
you have
hasn't.
to believe
Mark Steyn,
in something.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot,
You have to believe
Tucker.
in something.